The measures of central tendency are the most commonly used in statistical analysis. We know them as mean, median, and mode, and their use is ubiquitous in statistical analysis. So let's see how it works. Before we begin, let's take a quick look at our dataset in this course. We have been using the teaching evaluation data from the University of Texas. The dataset comprises of 463 courses in which we have information about the teaching evaluation score received by the instructor, and we have information about the attributes of the instructor, as well as the characteristics of the course. Once you have imported a CSV file with the Pandas Python library, the first step in getting to know your data is to discover the different data types it contains. You can display all columns and their data types with dataframe.info. In this case, we have named our data frame ratings_DF. It tells you how many rows you have. For the teaching rating data, we have 463 entries from 0 to 462 because Python starts counting from 0. And then it also gives you information about the data types. Object represents strings, int64 represents integer or whole numbers, and float represents real numbers, which could take on decimal points. Before we begin, let's have a conversation about population and samples. Essentially, if you have all the information of interest for a particular decision about every individual that is supposed to be involved in that decision, that is called a population. So if you're interested in looking at some attribute of driving, and we have information about all possible automobile drivers in the US, and then we call this the population. The sample, on the other hand, is a subset of population. So, for example, if we have data on all married drivers over the age of 25, then that's a subset. And within that subset, if we were to randomly select 5% of those married drivers over the age of 25, that would be our sample. We use samples especially in cases where we do not want to incur the cost of collecting data for the entire population. Now, let's consider that there are 230 million individuals in the country. A sample size of, say, 330 to 500 individuals randomly selected would suffice. This reduces the cost, especially in cases where you cannot collect information for the entire population. Therefore, using samples is really helpful and cost-effective. Here you see some Greek symbols on the screen. But don't be afraid, they mostly show the formula. We will then proceed from here. While they may differ in notation, essentially the mean for a population and sample are the same. It is the sum of all the observations, then divided by the number of observations to get the mean, which we call averages. There are several properties of the mean and they're meaningful, but one of the characteristics of a mean is that if you take the difference between the average value for a variable and subtract from all the observations and sum them up, that sum would be equal to 0. The median is different from the mean. When you order the data from the smallest value to the largest value, the result is in the middle. That is, the value in the middle indicating that there are an equal number of observations that are above and the equal number of observations are below that family. That value is called the median. So if the median salary in some city is $45,000, it means that 50% of the people make more than $45,000, and the other 50% make less than $45,000. Mode is essentially the value that occurs most frequently. Therefore, if the most common age in a class of students is 16, then that's the mode. We will now turn to Python for our hands-on training to estimate the summary statistics values for Beauty Score, teaching you about evaluation and age. We will use the dataframe.describe function to find the summary statistics. This prints out the number of rows, mean, standard deviation, minimum value, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile, and the maximum value. To find the summary statistics for a subset of the variables, you will have to state the column names, as we can see here. Otherwise, for the full population, we will call the .describe function on the data frame.